my mother used to say, when you're in a place and you need to make a decision, choose the hard way. If there's a choice between the two ways, choose the hard way. By the way, the hard way is usually the simple way too. So the complicated, clever way is and you think is going to be the shortcut, usually isn't. The simple way is based on virtue, justice, self-mastery, prudence.
Here we go. Welcome to a special edition of the Focusing Way podcast. I'm your host, David Battistella. We call these special editions The Way is Love. Find The Focusing Way on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our website, thefocusingway.com. Today on the Way is Love podcast, we have a world champion. We welcome Bear Woznick, a Masters World Champion Tandem surfer. His book, A Surfer's Guide to the Soul, recounts his life in faith, battling himself and the elements. I confess, I read this book in one sitting. It's amazing how the things you need to hear arrive at your doorstep in one way or another. If you like adventure, if you want to feel like you're sitting down with a good friend whose openness and willingness to share his failures as much as his successes, while the whole time putting you at ease, then this is a great read for you. If you're on any kind of a journey, then there's probably one that Bear has been on that will resonate with you. In the second part of our interview with author Bear Woznick and his book, A Surfer's Guide to the Soul, Bear shares about his ministry working with men, and we talk about work and marriage. Here's part 2 of our conversation with author Bear Woznick. I do want to talk man things. That was it's so great because it segued so perfectly. And it seems you do have a clear message to men in this book. And you raise a couple of sons yourself. And I played high school football. You tell this great story about when you're at Baylor where you and a friend you go out for hours and hours and hours and hours to try to have the perfect pass happen. You know, and that's struck me.
What I mean, right?
Yeah, it's just, but it's also one of those things that men will do, you know, especially when it comes to sports. And it's and they'll go over and over and over, but there has to be sort of grace and perfection involved to heighten that experience, to get that perfect arc and this outstretched thing and not losing a stride and everything. And there's that moment where everything is perfect and the people present know that it happened. And you describe it beautifully in the book. But saying that's a certain generation, you know. I don't even think football is the way it was, or ice hockey that I played in Canada growing up. Not quite the game it was in my youth. But what are the differences you're seeing in the men of this generation?
Okay, well, you know, when I go and speak, my wife is with me. A lot of times I'm speaking to mixed groups, and when she's with me, we'll get surrounded right away by women of every age. And they'll say, we need our men to be men. We need our men to be men again. And the younger women will say, you know, they never date us. They'll hang out with us, but they don't ask us out on a date. And then I see the men, maybe, now I'm talking about Christian men, you know, they'll ask them out on a date, but they never ask them to marry them. You know, so they cut, and I would say going back to Humana Vitae, back in the day of the 60s and back in that time frame, when the pill came out, it gave men total, you know, it used to be a woman before she would have sex with someone, she had to think, well, what if I get pregnant? What kind of man will this be will he be a good father to my children and a wife to me? When the pill came out, the kind of social contract that women had with each other, that I'm not going to have sex outside of marriage. I remember when it all changed. I mean, wow. I remember when suddenly it would be bad when someone lived with someone outside of marriage. It was just like, wow, I can't believe it. That was just so unusual. But now you see kind of like men get to have their cake and eat it too. They get to have sex with them, and yet they don't have the responsibility. John Paul II, one of the first things he did is he wrote a play and he wrote a book. I think the book was called Love and Responsibility. Mm-hmm. It goes hand in hand. In Hawaii, we say love, which is to give breath, aloha. and responsibility, kuliana. Well, we say the word love. The Catholics often use the word charity or caritas for the word love, because it means self-donation. It doesn't mean going to give charity to goodwill.
Yeah,
but
caritas.
it's willing to do good for the other through self-donation. And so I just think that men have become boys. You have to become a man.
Yeah.
You're born a male, but you got to become a man. And men have been allowed to not be responsible, and especially when it comes to a woman or to a relationship. And so they remain boys. And so the first thing is I tell women, don't have sex with a man until you're married. I know I didn't. I was a virgin on my wedding night.
Wow.
It wasn't the easiest thing to do, but yeah, I think that one of the biggest things, the most powerful thing there is, this powerful gift God gave us of the nuptial union of sex. And then you see the men falling really under attack from the pornographic industry and falling into pornography. And so they really don't need to even have a woman to use her, because of the pornography. And so the young men need to win that battle on pornography.
So dangerous.
It destroys the icon, that beautiful woman who's an icon of God's love. She should be the subject of our love, not an object of our lust, as John Paul II would say.
Yeah.
And so I think men have been able to get around being responsible. They get to live in their parents' basement longer, and they hang out with the other guys, and they have sex with a girl, and when she gets pregnant, they move in together, and with the second baby, they get engaged. And so to me, it's just a big cop out.
Yeah.
The number one thing a man should seek is kuliana, is responsibility. In Hawaii, the word kuliana means it's a stewardship. It's like, this is something God's given you. You own this. Mm-hmm. If it's to take care of your car or to take care of your family, or if you have a job and your job is to wash the dishes, that's your kuliana. It's something that's a gift that's given to you. You want to care for it, like Adam was called to care for the garden. So men need to seek out responsibility. They don't need to have, by the way, career satisfaction, because the great satisfaction in work is the dignity of doing work and providing a service for others and providing for your family and being self-reliant. I mean, most people don't say, I really am so fulfilled in my work. Your fulfillment comes in providing for your family and providing a service. The work itself, it's a gift. God, Adam and Eve, God gave Adam work to do before the fall. Mm-hmm. And so to take on the tough job and have a goal, have direction. So, yeah, I just really challenge the men that they need to. And I have a new book. My next book coming out is called The 12 Rules of Manliness. Where have all the cowboys gone?
Yeah.
And we have at deepadventure.com, we have our website where the men can join Bear's Man Cave, where we do Zoom meetups, and then we have the School of Manliness too. Because we're all bozos on the same bus.
Yeah.
We kind of need each other. Men
true.
need each other. You can't be a lone wolf out there. There isn't such, I used to have a cabin up in Montana, and there was a lone wolf, a gray wolf on my property. Actually, I was on his property. A gray wolf is a wolf that's been pushed out by the pack. He used to be the alpha male, and now he's been pushed out by younger men. And they look weak and scrawny, and they die.
Yeah.
So men, you need to be with other men who are devoted to the Lord.
It's so important. It's so important.
And you take on the physical challenges, like you said.
Yeah.
Take on a physical challenge. One of the first things we do when men join our School of Manliness is what's your weight situation? What are you doing physically to be fit? You know? And so if you need to have a physical challenge, when I pedaled my bicycle across the United States, that was so that I would grow in fortitude. It wasn't so that I would bicycle across the United States. I developed the virtue of fortitude. So take on physical challenges.
Yeah, very, very important.
Learn to lift weights, learn a martial art. I think all men should know how to defend the people that they love. And so develop, your physical skills, and then you kind of grow from the outside in sometimes.
So beautiful. One thing you and I have in common as well is we've been through the annulment process. So I don't know if you want to have that conversation. I'll let you think about it for a sec before I ask you the question. If you
No, yes,
don't,
of
we
course.
can.
Yes, of course.
But you shared a lot about that marriage, and it was kind of a time in your life when you were grinding it out. I think a lot of men can relate to that. I certainly related to that myself. I've gone through that process of annulment as well, which I found to be a very, really a deep understanding of what a marriage, a valid marriage, really is. And I'm just wondering if what your experience of that process was, if you had that kind of experience.
I did, and I know that it's really cool that you asked me, because people look at me and they go, "Oh, he just has this great life." And no, I had a very. I just remember when I met her, my thought was, could I be married? When I first saw her, I thought, could I be married to her 20 years from now? And our marriage actually lasted exactly 20 years. And it was, I won't go into the details, but it was just very, very hard. I was very lonely, and it was just very, very hard. And so when things finally came undone, the church was there. And going through the annulment, when you ask all these questions, and then others who knew you then are asked to answer questions, and to hear my parents especially to answer those questions, and others in my life. And then, because the church says what God has put together, let no man put asunder, the sacredness of marriage. It's not easy to get married in the Catholic Church either.
Yeah, that's true.
The pre Cana and all of that, they want to make sure that you're as ready as you can be. And then to end a marriage is, the church teaches us that, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. And then they ask the question, did God join these two people together? Were both of them capable to have a relationship? I remember once sitting there, and all of a sudden this equation came into my mind, that it's not 1 + 1 in a marriage. It's 1 × 1 = 1. It's not 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
And then it was like the Holy Spirit just said, but what's 1 times 0? It's 0.
Yeah.
And so if only one person is really there, then you don't have anything. And so, and then I went through counseling too, that the church had me go to. And so it was just a wonderful healing time for me. It lasted a long time. It took a while.
Yeah.
But I got right down to the root of things, and there was the confessional there. What about you?
Yeah, for me it was an awakening, and I understood, because the marriage is not annulled, the marriage is declared null. So it didn't exist. The relationship existed, whatever thing you had was there, but a marriage in the eyes was not there. It wasn't, and so to arrive at that and to understand it and to see, you understand why this church of ours, which is 2 millennium of knowledge that has been passed through. When you go through a process like this, there is a wisdom that is informing that process that is like no other. And this is not about like walking into a lawyer's office and saying, separate me from this situation. This is a spiritual thing. And I had a very similar experience to what you're talking about, without going into a lot of details. But I finally understood what it was not. And your description of it, of 1 × 0 = 0, is an excellent description. But it's also a lesson to men out there to go through the process, know what you're putting together, and know that in a marriage process, and I'm sure you experienced this and you describe it in your book, but that in a real marriage, that the Holy Spirit and Jesus is part of that. And when that is there, that is when you're in the real thing.
And then we go back to my wife, Cindy, now, who met her 7 years ago. And she came down to the beach because she fell in love with tandem surfing. She'd come down and watch us tandem surf in Cocoa Beach when we compete there. for 7 or 8 years. She was raising her niece whose mother died, and her mother was dying of cancer for those 7 or 8 years. So
Wow.
her Sunday mornings were for her going down to the beach on a Saturday or Sunday morning from Orlando and getting her sanity for that little bit of time.
Mm.
And she fell in love with tandem surfing. And then one day, Easter Sunday, my friend Eileen was announcing the event, and she said, anyone here who wants to learn to tandem, Bear's teaching tandem. And so she jumped up and said, pick me. And I know now what a marriage is, because with her, she's full of grace. I always call her full of grace, full of wisdom. And she's for me, and she gets me. And in ministry, especially when you feel vulnerable, she has the insight, and she encourages me, because we're not, Balaam's donkey, right? I always think I'm kind of like that.
Yeah.
The donkey that talked. I kind of feel like that. But she's and she helps me all the time. There's always, when we tandem surf together, I should describe that. When we tandem surf, I'm the captain of the ship, because there can only be one captain on a ship. And we paddle out together. We paddled just 2 days ago. We were out tandem surfing, and we paddle out together, and then we wait. And when we wait, she sits up next to me with her back against my chest, or maybe she's laying down. She's in front of me, and then I choose the wave. And then because I'm the one who's surfing. Mm. So, and then we have pictures of her paddling and the determination. First of all, the joy. There's a picture of us standing on the beach before a contest, and I'm all gritty and determined and looking at the swells, and she's just holding my arm next to me like she's walking down after being married, and she's got this huge smile on her face. And then when we're paddling, you can see her total determination, her valiance, And then when we drop in, the first thing we do is I get up, and then she gets up right after me. But if you do it right, it looks like you're getting up together. Mm. And her feet are between the span of my feet. And so she's not out there surfing. Her back's against my chest, or cheek to cheek, so she can sense what I'm doing when I'm surfing. And like last time we were out, we dropped in on a good sized wave. And as we're getting up, she's already spinning, spiraling up to face me with her hands on my shoulder. And as I do the bottom turn, she jumps into this beautiful lift. And then, so as a man, I'm using all my skill and my ability to protect her. Like when someone drops in on us, I take the hit on my shins, or if we are going to wipe out, I drop off the back of the board and hold her. I get dragged across the reef, Yeah. My job is to protect her, to choose the wave, to use my skill set, and to surf. But as soon as she's up in the air, no one's looking at me. They're looking at this beautiful, powerful, graceful, valiant woman. And but when she jumps, her job is two things. She locks into the position that she needs to be. She needs to lock that in. She's never relaxed. She's locking it. Every joint has a thing it needs to do. And then there's a place that her eyes are supposed to look. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down at my shoulder, but there's a focus point, right? And I just remember the first contest we were in, we were surfing in Cocoa Beach, and we got a wave. Of course, we won the event, but we got the wave. And she was up there, and I could feel she was getting heavy. And what that means to me is she's looking down, because it makes her weight drop. Because she had her arms on my shoulders, and she faced me, and then I lifted her up so her feet are extended out in front of me, and her arms are locked out. She needs to look up, and I yelled at her, "Look up, look up!" And as soon as she did, things locked up. So a tandem surfer, a man who's a world-class tandem surfer, he knows where his partner's eyes are. Yeah. He knows if she looks left or right, not even moves her head, just looks. And so I always say, you talk about focus, where we put our focus is where we go. I know when I'm surfing and someone's a beginner and they're paddling in and they're going to run into me, I say, look to your right. In other words, if they look at me, they're going to crash.
Yeah.
But if they look to the right, the board just turns. Or when you're riding your Harley and there's a semi truck going next to you, you don't look at that truck because you're going to swerve into it. So the word for sin in Scripture, both in the Greek and the Hebrew, is an archery term, and it means to miss the mark. Yeah. And so as an archer, it's like, where is your focus? And so Cindy has these different places that she focuses. When she does that, we're locked in as a tandem team, and we can do some. There's 45 different lifts.
Wow.
In the tandem surfing world, and you're judged by how well you surf while you're in a lift. So she really helps me.
It's so beautiful too, how that relationship has to extend out into your relationship when you're not on a surfboard in the middle of a wave, you know. And it
can be beautiful.
Yeah,
it can be beautiful. In competition, it's so funny how you'll see a couple come to the beach and the guy goes one way and the girl goes the other way. They go stomping off. They're mad at each other. You know?
Yeah.
So what happens in the ocean reveals what's been happening on the land.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have there's a beautiful moment in there when you first met, where you describe how she had this really shy kind of way of saying, okay. Or I think it was that. Yeah. And, but it's so beautiful. These beautiful intimate moments that come through in the book. And, wow. I'm going to read a quote from the book now. Is that okay? We'll just have a little. This is the way of life, isn't it? When we try to take shortcuts that lack integrity, we often end up putting ourselves and others in dire circumstances. When we choose the harder but right way, we ultimately end up better off.
My mother used to say, when you're in a place and you need to make a decision, choose the hard way. If it's a choice between the two ways, choose the hard way. By the way, the hard way is usually the simple way too. So the complicated, clever way is and you think is going to be the shortcut, usually isn't. The simple way is based on virtue, justice, self-mastery, prudence, fortitude, faith, hope, and love. If you focus on seeking the true good in every situation, then the path forward is usually pretty simple. If you try to be clever and connive your way through and shortcut your way through, then it might seem easier, but in the long run you lose. If you have a choice between two, choose the hard way, and usually that's the simple way. It's simple to see, it's the way, and then God will be with you on that path. And if you do that, you get to see God do stuff. Like I said, if you choose the simple way, you choose God's way, you can see God do stuff instead of saying, "Okay, God, I got this." It's like when David was bringing the ark into his town, they were carrying it in an inappropriate way, and the ark started to fall, and Uzziah, I think it was, went to steady it. He got killed. Yeah, the power of God. So our job isn't to try to fix God or take care of God or steady God. God just looks at us and just says, "I got this." Just walk in faith.
Such great advice. Such great advice. And I mean, you mentioned earlier in our conversation paddling across 30 miles of open ocean, and there's so many times when you sort of go it alone in this book. You go into nature on your own, where it's you, the earth, the ocean that the Creator has created, and whatever you've put in front of you. And, those experiences have shaped you and formed you. But what advice do you have for people who really want to go it alone? Because you weren't going it alone, really, is my point in those situations. You actually were always doing that with God.
There's the both end of Catholicism, not either or, but both and.
Yeah.
And I am a people person, I guess they would say, but I really long for solitude. I love to read and to write. But there's a saying, when you're out in big surf, you're alone, because no one can get to you. If you're in trouble, you're alone. So you need to learn how to be that person that's comfortable with yourself. And the times of solitude and prayer, especially the high point of the Eucharist, the Eucharistic summit. But that time of being alone, when people come out here to Hawaii, they often say, I'm coming out here to get some recreation. And I go, well, if you're going to hang out with me, you're going to get some recreation too.
Yeah.
So I'll take them outside of their comfort zone to serve for whatever I'm going to do. And then I have them go out to a point of land or peak of a mountain and write a letter to God and a letter to themselves, and have that time of solitude, of really being able to hear God's voice. Your ministry, the concept of the focus, I call it the still point. There's times in your life when you're totally focused on what I'll tell you what, when you skydive, you're not thinking about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's this moment in surfing when you drop in and you're in the barrel. Mm-hmm. And there's actually moments, you don't even have to really be in the barrel for this to happen, on a real glassy, good sized wave. There's the roar, like a locomotion of the wave. But there are times when you don't feel like you're moving, because you see the tube in front of you and you're not accelerating to go out of it, and you're not falling back further. You're just there in that still point. And so even though you're moving horizontally across the face of the wave, and even though the wave is roaring around you, you're just in that still point. And so I would just tell people, maybe as a way to end, is that you're, no matter what's going on around you, you need to have that still point of where you come back to God, and you need to go visit that still point every day. I have my office chair and I have my prayer chair. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You need to have a place and a time where you go and you get still, and you spend time with God, and you find out again why you're not a human doing, you're a human being.
Yeah.
So how to just be still in the moment. And but we find that a lot in surfing. There's that moment you're not thinking about anything but just that moment and experiencing it. And you need to find those kind of experiences in life where your iPhone isn't sitting right there, and you're,
Absolutely.
And getting out in nature does that for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you're right. That whole process of focusing is coming to that inside place, that quiet, contemplative place that we can find in prayer, reaching into our hearts and sitting there and just being there, and waiting for those right next words to come. Bear Woznick, I am so happy to know you now. Mm-hmm. Masters World Champion Tandem Surfer. Your book is A Surfer's Guide to the Soul, and it recounts your life in faith, battles, life, the elements. It's a real pleasure to read. I really think everyone should pick up this book. You don't have to be a surfer to appreciate the wonderful life and the way you've expressed it in these words, for which I am very grateful.
And thank you, Kavika, for David, for spending this time with me. I love what you're doing, and I love the opportunity just to share that still point.
Check us out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, our website, thefocusingway.com.